climate justice. When do we want it?
September 21st, 2014, 400,000 people converged in New York City for the largest climate march in history. 350.org and their spokesperson, Bill McKibben, organized this march as a call for collective action in demanding climate justice. In order to steer attention and pressure towards the global meeting, the demonstration was scheduled 2 days before the UN Climate Summit in New York. Marchers snaked their way along Central Park West, through Times Square, and ended at Penn Station. The march was comprised of 6 sections, including frontline communities, students, environmental organizations, and scientists. Among the many participants, 200 Swarthmore students and faculty were in attendance. By documenting the motivations and aspirations of the people marching and the reflections of Swarthmore students, we present a narrative of Swarthmore and the youth participation in the People's Climate March.
Why are you marching?
Because I'm the first year graduate student from City College and my major is sustainability. So that's why I'm marching and I march for this one. And we are trying to put the CO2 concentration in the air and down to this level.
350 parts per million.
In 400 ppm. So that's why I want to argue and find and make other leaders to hear our voices.
I went because I thought it was an important event and important to sort of step up and show your commitment and solidarity with the diverse group of people who were participating.
I felt very exhilarated marching because there were so many other people who had the same thought in mind that I did about the climate change. And I had been fighting Covana from bringing the trash from New York down to Chester. And I didn't realize so many other people had different other reasons why they were marching, but it all came out to the same thing about the climate change. It all came out about that because all this smoke and stuff is coming out of these stacks down here.
I was marching because I think that climate change is a grave threat both to the future and to the present, and I know that I am someone who is going to be largely sheltered from many of the impacts of climate change because of my position in the world, and I think that as someone who does have that privilege, it's important to support and be present for those who are going to be more impacted. Of course, we all will be impacted.
In order to be relevant in the world, I have to be at this march. Everybody is going.
It was kind of amazing because there were just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on either side of me, all holding signs and marching, and at the very least we were all concerned with climate change and how it's affecting people and climate justice, even though beyond that people might not have been of the same political leaning or had the same thoughts I had. We all had that baseline commonality, which was, I think, really empowering.
Just everybody, somebody I worked on a farm in the desert with, everybody was there, and there was all this art and music and chanting, and it was just this really exciting moment.
I think that marching was energizing, and that there were so many people, there was so much hope and so much song and laughter, and the sense that maybe we really could create a change.
Along the march route, everyone became silent for a moment until in solidarity with those that are facing the impacts of climate change every day in their daily lives, and then from the back up to the front, you could just hear people yelling as the moment of silence ended. And it was just kind of a wave going up 8th Avenue, which was really awesome. And
I have seen in my lifetime, I've seen mostly the effects on other people. My friend John the beekeeper is here. He has seen his bee colony decimated by the change in the climate. My brother was in Texas when Katrina hit. So I've seen the results of extreme weather.
I think of Hurricane Sandy that happened my freshman year, and like I was playing hide and seek in Parrish, I think, that night. I remember Hurricane Sandy kind of fondly, but I also know that that was a completely and utterly devastating superstorm that ruined hundreds and hundreds of people's lives.
I think about the storms I've seen. I think about the fact that there was Hurricane Sandy when I was at Swarthmore and how strange that seemed, and I think about really hot summer.
Mostly what I've seen has been inaction on the part of my generation and the body politic generally.
We Swarthmore marchers were in the student section, focused on a just transition from our fossil fuel reliance. Climate change disproportionately impacts every younger generation over the one before it. In the past, climate change has been dismissed as a problem for younger generations to deal with, but it is growing increasingly more evident that the situation is so severe that it cannot be solved in one lifetime.
So I'm marching because I care a lot about this kid and the people in this generation. And as he saw in the movie The Lorax, if nobody cares an awful lot, nothing's going to change. So we're here to let our leaders know that we really care and make sure that he can see some of the amazing things in the natural world that I've been able to see.
I'm here with Zybus too because I wanted to stop fiddling with dirty socks and start investing in a clean future that we're going to be living in, a future that's not going to be ravaged by environmental disaster.
I think a lot of people, young people who want to make change, have to run for office and have to get governmental positions and positions of power, not only in industry but also in the government, so that they can start changing things and the way policies made for climate change.
Youth will necessarily be the direct game changers because we generally are not the ones in power, at least not for the next 10, 20, 30 years. However, I do think it is important to have a youthful, passionate, optimistic, idealistic, ridiculous voice in the dialogue. If nothing else, as a counterbalance to whatever reactionary stuff goes on.
Climate change is not an isolated phenomenon. In fact, extreme weather events, rising sea levels, food insecurity, worsening air quality, and heat and tropical disease will all have disproportionate consequences on low-income people, people of color, and indigenous communities. After events like Hurricane Katrina, it's become clear that the social events of climate justice and environmental justice are undeniably linked. They have influenced each other and even fused in many ways. We asked Swadis whether they felt like the climate march reflected this.
I feel like in general though, the march was about climate change specifically, climate justice. So most of the groups were screaming, what do we want? Climate change, what do we want it now? Not a lot of the groups I saw personally were like, you know, very aware or very transparent on the, no, not transparent. A lot of them didn't talk about the human consequences for like minorities or for...
So indirectly I think it did, but like the point of the march wasn't to talk about the fact that there's landfills in communities that are predominantly people of color.
I think the Chester residents who did go were just thrilled to think that there were so many people who were also committed to social and environmental justice and to stopping the kinds of environmental injustices that they're experiencing on a daily basis.
And I met a whole lot of people that were not from our area, you know, from all over the place, and they were talking about environmental justice and what's going on in the atmosphere and what needs to be done. And, you know, and it seems like nothing's being done because our Congress is not thinking about that situation right now.
I think like that a really key element was of that and the march in general was the emphasis that was placed on those that are most affected by climate change in the fossil fuel industry. You know, the people in the front lines of extraction and fence line communities were placed at the front of the march, and to really highlight the impacts.
Personally, I'm holding out for some transformative systemic change, so addressing the problem and rooting the issue rather than just looking at the symptoms. Changing the way that we practice a lot of things.
Yeah, I think its success comes in the fact that it like reminds people of that these things are happening and that there's more outside the cubicle and window.
I also think that it felt sad in a certain way because it was limited. It was an action, but it wasn't going to change everything, and it was only those people who had the resources to be there, and it was predominantly white, and it was predominantly wealthy, and there was a lot of waste that went into it. And while I don't believe that waste in and of itself negates the value of a march like that, seeing just the giant quantity of posters and giant quantity of crap that we didn't really need, that we were receiving, t-shirts and stickers and all of those things, sort of contradicted the fundamental notion that I think is underlying what I think is the change that needs to happen to prevent this climate crisis and to shift to a more sustainable way of living.
The way that march can work and be effective is demonstrating to lawmakers that there are, say, 300,000, 400,000 people that are willing to like stop whatever they're doing and actually like say something about what's wrong in the world. Even if you're not affecting actual policy change through a march, but like just signifying to people that, hey, this is something to pay attention to.
I do think that the march was successful. Like on our campus, I know it was really energizing for Mountain Justice and that they had I think that's one way that they got a lot of freshmen involved in the divestment campaign.
And I think that, yeah, I was really excited by the turnout of Swarthmore students. I think having like 200 students was a really awesome way to like kickstart the activism on campus this semester, and really like put climate on the as a big issue, I think, going into the semester on campus.
Despite the exciting progress made, the climate movement has a tumultuous future. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, in November 2014, labeled global warming effects worse than was even previously expected. People and ecosystems will be increasingly threatened by food shortages, floods, refugee crises, and mass extinctions. Developing countries will continue to be at the brunt of these societal threats. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon spoke of the urgency that needs to be felt in the Conference of the Party December negotiations in Lima, Peru. Science has spoken. There is no ambiguity in their message, he said. Leaders must act. Time is not on our side.
In cities around the world, hundreds of thousands of people called for action. They demanded that leaders lead. That is why we are here today. We are not here to talk. We are here to make history.
Unfortunately, there is no history of world leaders agreeing on strong emission-reducing policies since the COP meeting's conception in 1992. There was a weak accord in Copenhagen in 2009 to keep global temperatures from rising 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit from post-industrial levels. Many look to the Paris negotiations in 2015, however, as the pivotal meeting to create binding emissions reductions amongst the world's countries.
Yeah, so I hope that is like a shifting moment. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that these kinds of messages where large groups of people come together do make a difference, and to what extent we'll see, both on the inside in the formal meetings at the United Nations meeting in Lima, and then the outside, again, the less formal, non-governmental kinds of events and collaborations and connections that people will be making. We'll see what happens. I predict that the the march in New York City actually will be on everybody's mind, and it will be used as a as evidence that people are watching and people are expecting.
Yeah, 300,000 people is a small number of people in the world. I'd like to think that, I don't know, some lawmaker either on a state, national, or global scale looked at that and was like, wow, okay, maybe like I could get some votes if I worked on this sort of issue. Or even just like had an actual heartfelt moment and said, like, people care about this, maybe I should too.
I actually don't have a very positive view of the future in terms of like humans surviving climate change. I am fully aware of the fact that our Earth will move forward and will reset itself because of the natural systems that exist here, but like that happens on a time scale that vastly it's just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times larger than like a human time scale is. So I guess for a very long time I haven't been concerned about like saving the planet, because we don't need to do that, we need to save ourselves.
Frankly, I think it was just all for, a good face for politicians to be there like, yeah, we care. But, policy-wise, I don't think the march was a defining moment for them. It's like, oh, people actually care, because they know people care.
Fundamentally, we're going to need institutional action. I'm going to be attending the UN Conference on Climate Change in December, and I think that space is a space where there needs to be a binding treaty, and there needs to be a carbon tax in the United States, and that there really has to be concrete decisions that may not seem sufficient, but are something on that larger scale beyond those small choices, because I think that individually we don't necessarily have the incentives to change our way of life, to move away from such a carbon-intensive lifestyle, but I think that sometimes those incentives can come from above. But I think it has to be both. I think it has to be grassroots as well as from institutions. I don't know, I hope we can figure it out. I don't really think we can, but I hope I'm wrong.
What becomes clear from everybody's responses is this. The Climate March demonstrated that people from different backgrounds, identities, and ages can come together and make powerful demands. We all share collective agency in demanding climate and environmental justice, especially in issues like this that will affect us, the generations after us, and marginalized communities. Only time will tell just how effective the People's Climate March was, but regardless, it seems to have made an impact here at Swarthmore College.